You are what you eat. We've all heard that saying. And I thought, where did this come from? So I investigated, and it's thought to have originated in 1826 by Anthelme Brillat-Savarin. And I've totally adulterated this French name. He was a French lawyer and politician and the author of The Physiology of Taste. And he wrote, quote, "Tell me what you eat, and I will tell you what you are." Do you think what you eat and how you prepare your food tells us about who you are? I've been thinking about this for myself. Does the large popcorn I get at the movie theater and the pounds of cheese that I would consume if given the opportunity say something about me? We're going to talk about this today, and perhaps this discussion will affect your choices at Easter time or Passover. So have a listen. Welcome. This is GynoCurious. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Novatt. From both sides of the speculum, we are here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please leave your comments at comments@radiofreerhinecliffe.org or write to me at gynocurious@gmail.com. Please follow the show, share it with others. This helps Radio Free Rhinecliffe as well as GynoCurious. So today's guest is Rebecca Blake. She holds a Master of Science in Clinical Nutrition and Dietetics from NYU and completed a Master's of Science in Healthcare Delivery Leadership at the School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Becky is a clinical nutrition subject matter expert, speaker, and clinical healthcare operations executive with 18 years of experience across the greater New York City nutrition and healthcare landscape. Woo! This woman knows about food, I'll tell you. Welcome, Becky. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Amy. Appreciate it.
It's so nice to have you here. So tell me, why did you pursue a career in nutrition? What inspired you to do so?
Yeah, good question. So at Tufts undergrad, I studied clinical psychology and sort of fancied that I may want a counseling type career, but wasn't really ready to commit to a grad school type program at, the ripe old age of 21. So moved to New York City as any intelligent young female would do, and thought I could make it there. So had like a variety of different interesting jobs, including at the high yield bond desk at Morgan Stanley for a while, which was great fun, but not my life's calling. And so, in the midst of some bad dating experiences and feeling generally directionless and having that existential angst that we tend to have at this age, I bought a bike because I saw a bicycle because I saw an advertisement in the subway, probably the 6 train, for the Boston to New York AIDS ride. And so this was like a fundraising effort for AIDS research. So this is 2000. This is about, yeah, this is around 2000. And so, again, I signed up for the ride without a bike. I'm like, you know what? I have to throw myself into something else here. I started to ride. I started to ride every day. I started to do loops in Central Park before I'd even go to work in the morning, and I loved it. And then I met a bunch of other cool folks who were also training for these long distance rides. So this was about to be like the better part of 300 miles in 3 days. So something you have to train for. Met a bunch of folks, got out of my own way, got out of my own head, and saw very interesting things happening in my body, and with my food choices. And so I had a light bulb moment on my bicycle, which was, you know what? You're not going to stay at Morgan Stanley forever, but why don't you look into becoming a registered dietitian? Because then you could deepen your understanding of how we use food, how we need nutrients, what it's all about, realizing I knew so very little, and also parlay that into a counseling profession. And so I did.
I have said this on GynoCurious many times, and it just bears repeating because I am kind of awed by the phenomenon of how often lessons through our body teach us about who we are, what decisions we might want to make, even the pursuit of careers. So here
Yeah.
you are, a woman who's learning how to do long distance bicycling, and it just, segues into this career. It's not a natural progression necessarily,
Not
right?
really.
If you had said to me, Becky, oh, I decided to sell bikes for a living, that, that might make sense. But it is often this crystallization that happens in this organic fashion for all of us. with things that seem related and other things that aren't related. So thank you for that story. I love it. And I can just imagine, I spent time in the city and I can just imagine that one day you sped by as I walked through Central Park and
Pretty
there
likely,
you were.
actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So the other thing that I want to ask about, because you also then went to pursue further training in healthcare leadership. So, can you tell us about that shift? And then we're going to kind of focus on food.
absolutely. So that shift occurred as I had kind of risen through the clinical nutrition track that you have when you're working in major hospital centers. I was at Mount Sinai for many, many years and then transitioned to become the director of clinical nutrition down when the former Continuum Health Partners merged with the big Sinai institution that was. So I started to run the department downtown and also the site in Brooklyn that we had acquired. And so what I started to realize was I was no longer practicing nutrition quite the way I had been initially, and I was more now in leadership and into administrative roles. And I felt, well, this could be an interesting direction for things to take. Maybe it's going to be less counseling and more understanding of administration on a larger healthcare level. So I was in the back seat of a cab with like the VP of operations at Mount Sinai. And she started to share with me that they were launching an inaugural program through the Sinai School of Medicine, which was designed for already kind of executive track healthcare leaders to deepen their understanding of how payment systems work, how hospitals are run, various interesting snippets of the history of healthcare in America and how we got to where we are. And that's
Hmm.
a totally different rant, but the program sounded really interesting, and I've kind of like to feature myself as a lifelong learner. I think you have to be, especially in the field of nutrition, which is always evolving. And so I thought, hey, just toss another degree under my belt. Why not?
Great, great. I think all of us in medicine should actually go through training in leadership around healthcare because it is so deeply wound into our everyday. And for most of us, we're left with the feeling of like, why, who, how? It's such a quagmire right now. So bravo in pursuing that. So you've
Thank
mentioned
you.
two words that I think we just need to reiterate. You mentioned how you mingled psychology with nutrition,
Yeah.
which is clearly so real for all of us. And then the idea of evolution. So I guess I want to start with just, do you think we are what we eat? Do you think this French guy had something going on there?
So there's some truth in there for sure. It's not the whole picture. And the reason I say that is I work with a pretty robust group of diverse clients. And it's a little reductive, I think, to say that we are what we eat because we are also so much a product of our own environment, how we grew up, what our education around food is, our resources. And so to say that someone who's, subsisting on a highly ultra processed diet, right, which of course we're going to, shake our fingers at that, but maybe that person doesn't really understand yet. And if they really understood what it is that they're doing and what they're putting in their bodies, they would make a shift. And so I don't want to say that they are what they eat because they are more what they know.
Yeah, well put. Well put. That there are so many aspects of our life experience that impact what we eat. Again, I was thinking about the large bucket of popcorn that I get when I go to the local upstate theater, which is this great theater in Rhinebeck, and alternative films, and it has real butter and it has nutritional yeast. And I get the biggest bucket there is. And I must admit, by the end of it, I'm thinking, why did I eat all that popcorn? But there's something so pleasurable about digging into that trough. And it dates back to when I was a kid, and getting popcorn at the movie theater was an incredible event because we didn't have such things in our house. We didn't have anything salty. We didn't have any snacks like that. So
Yeah.
getting popcorn was truly an event in our family.
Yeah.
And it just resonates. It just continues to resonate, even though I might say intellectually, that much popcorn probably isn't so good for my colon. And yet, you know, The behavior is
And yet
so
you love
deep.
it, and
I
it's
know.
pleasurable, and that's the thing.
Right.
Food is one of the most readily accessible, affordable, seemingly harmless pleasures that we as humans can access in our lives, and it's not just about the food, right? You just said this is actually dating back to an experience you had in your childhood, and it talks about the experience of comfort and what
Right.
we associate with comfort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pleasure and comfort. It's true. It's so true. So, with all that said, and knowing human nature, which is driven often by pleasure and comfort, how do we help our clients, people listening? How
Mhm.
do we help them kind of look at the way they eat and debunk nutritional myths, fad diets? Like, where do you begin? Because there's just so many ways of looking at
Mm.
this. And, I've interviewed other nutritionists on the show, and everybody has a slightly different approach. But for you, what do you think is the best way to kind of debunk all the noise that we all hear
Yeah.
around how to eat and how we are in the face of our relationship with food?
So for me, when I'm working with a new client, the approach is always to set up a guilt-free, shame-free zone for working together, because you can't expect anyone to actually want to work with you, stay with you, keep coming back week after week and exploring and deepening their own relationship with food and with their own bodies if you can't establish real trust. And I think that the trust that you have that's between practitioner and client or patient is completely integral to what I'm going to call the healing process, right? Whether it's healing around food, healing around body image, healing around a disease state, right? So someone just found out they're pre-diabetic or they're a newly diagnosed diabetes case and they want to change. Well, first of all, they need to feel safe sharing some pretty intimate details of their life with you.
Like the
Right?
bucket of popcorn. Yep.
The bucket of popcorn or, the famous Hitchcockian image of what happens. I think I forget, it might be Rear Mirror, what am I,
Rear
the one with
window.
the big apartment, whatever. The idea that he was it's a Hitchcockian theme. He was fascinated with what happens if you rip the fronts off of houses and you see what actually goes on in people's homes, right? Someone has to feel comfortable enough to willingly let you rip the front door off their home, walk right in and see what they're doing between Zoom meetings and what they do first thing in the morning and, snack-a-palooza, which occurs before bed, as we sometimes call it. And so building the trust and building it pretty quickly is important. And so I reiterate in a way that maybe even becomes annoying at times, this is a guilt-free, shame-free zone. And what we talk about here may feel scary and vulnerable, but understand that A, you're not going to say anything I haven't heard before. I'm not going to be sitting here making faces of, oh, I can't believe they do that. Like, are you kidding me? I can't believe that was lunch. There's no judgment. It's food. It's food, right? It's like any other thing in our lives. We have to sort of de emotionalize the topic in order to really get anywhere. So that's how I start. And then because the internet and social media has become such a confusing space, I really make it clear that I would like to be the source of information and that I will recommend other people on Instagram, perhaps that I follow and that I respect. So I try to turn down a little bit of if they're following a lot of people that are sort of on the fringes of not science or deeply entrenched in not nutrition science. And yes, I'm going to go out there and say, the fad diets, the ketos, the no carb styles. For body image issues and eating disordered folks, I generally really ask them to scan their social media and figure out what's really serving them and what's just promoting some really scary negative thoughts about their own bodies. So it depends. I guess the answer is it depends. My approach depends, but A, trust through no shame, no judgment. Two, there's a lot of noise out there, and getting our sources of information from so many different people is very confusing. So, yes.
Yeah, no, totally. And thank you for bringing that up. And it segues to a thought I had, and I wanted your point of view. So often women will come into my office and they're like, I really want to change the way I'm eating. And can you give me a step by step approach towards a new nutritional approach? And I must admit, I'm kind of stymied because step by step, that feels constrictive. It also feels very formulaic in a way that just doesn't appeal to most of us. So, how would you respond to someone who says, "Oh, Becky, can you give me a step-by-step approach of how to eat?" Is that in fact a good way? Not a good way? How would you respond to that particular inquiry?
Huh? I would say I can do that. And it's something, this is a little sneak peek about a launch that's happening soon in my end of the business, but it is something I am calling the method.
Hmm.
And that is how I am working with my clients. And is it step by step? Yeah, it is. But you need more than one session to do it. And you need more than one 10-minute conversation to do it. And I'm happy to give you the outline of what it is. The very high level view is one, the what we eat. Okay. So we will talk about the what, and I will find out the what you are eating, you, my new patient, by building trust with you and by doing the famous 24-hour food recall. Now, does that say everything? Absolutely not. Was this a weird day for you? Did you have 6 meetings you didn't expect? Blah, blah, blah. Your in laws were in town. All of it. So maybe it's a couple days of a food recall that are representative of randomness in your life. But I get a very clear picture of what's really going into someone's body. Again, this all has to assume transparency in communication, right? If you don't want to tell me about the 6 cupcakes you ate, I get it, but I need to know. I need to know if you want me to help you, right? So, 2, the how much we eat, right? So it's the what, and the what, ideally, just to like get that one out of the way, is a primarily whole foods based style of nutrition, which is what I call mostly whole foods most of the time.
Like that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The how much we eat. So, the how much we eat, you have to understand, is inextricably linked to how fast we eat. And until
Hmm.
we can understand how fast we are eating and make that period of time last at least 20 minutes, talking about a meal here, and understanding our body's own stop point. So, a lot of the overweight and obesity in our nation can be attributed to what we just kind of blanket term overeating. That means intake of energy beyond what we're going to burn off, right? It's a very big, big, big term. So, to try to get it down to what are the issues here? Often it's that we eat too fast. Okay. And therefore, we don't allow those leptin levels. So I'm going to get sciencey. Leptin is that satiety or fullness hormone that gets triggered at a certain point into our eating experience. So, ghrelin, you may have heard of, that's the hormone that gets raised when we're hungry. Leptin is the thing that gets raised. Ghrelin gets suppressed. Leptin gets raised as we eat. It takes a good 20 minutes for our brains to understand those new levels of leptin. So anything you're eating within a 20-minute span of time extremely quickly is food you are risking overeating by not really knowing if you're going beyond what I'm going to call the point of gentle satiety.
Mm.
Okay? Gently full is what we're going for when we eat.
Not that feeling that we have after Thanksgiving when we are about to roll out of or fall out of our chairs.
Correct. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what? If that happens to you once or twice a year, maybe 3 times, normal.
Mm-hmm.
If that's happening to you multiple times a day, multiple times a week, I almost guarantee you are struggling with your weight.
Mm.
And this is the beauty. You can lose weight without feeling hungry. And this is where the intuitive eating piece comes in. Intuitive and mindful also being completely related. Intuitive being, am I hungry right now? what does my body say it wants? Okay, this is a science and an art that I work on with my clients. Though it's intuitive, it doesn't mean it feels intuitive yet. You have to learn the intuitive thing.
Right.
And then the mindfulness, right? The ability to say to myself, okay, I'm frantic right now. Maybe I'm too hungry. I'm setting myself up to eat this hot pizza that just arrived at my door way too quickly. And I guarantee I will be at least 3 slices in, well under the 20-minute mark. What can we do? And I will work with folks to determine how we can A, slow them down, B, get them to understand that they can learn where that gentle satiety point is, and repeat and repeat and repeat. And guess what? Everyone loses weight.
And I love that
Everyone.
you didn't say, I'm going to teach them how not to have pizza.
Nope.
You're saying if pizza is a part of your pleasure, part of your nutritional intake,
Yep.
then you're going to help folks understand how to eat that pizza in a healthier fashion. So one, you get nutrition, but you don't just get the fat calories. And
Exactly.
it's gosh, it's so striking, isn't it, how fast everything is done in this world. And
Yeah.
again, the social media and the internet have assisted us with the speed of information, which has its benefits for sure.
Yep.
But it just is so much the tempo of everything we do. And that one of the reasons that the world of mindfulness has become such a kind of, if you will, burgeoning and profitable way of being is that we're all consciously or unconsciously looking for ways to slow down because everything around us is rushed. And oh, isn't it great that we can get that pizza delivered to us in 10 minutes after we order it? Oh, really fast, right? But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean we consume it the same rate.
And that's where we have to learn how to understand our own nervous systems. And
Mm,
so I often recommend to folks, I mean, I am an avid yogi, and no, I don't just tell everyone to do what I do, but I do often tell folks when I'm working with them, just so you know, anything I'm asking you to do, vis-a-vis slow down, vis-a-vis mindfulness around how long is this pizza slice taking me, I guarantee I'm also doing
yeah,
every day.
yeah.
It
One of
takes
the
that
things,
kind of focus.
yes. And I think there are a lot of Americans out there, and perhaps across the world, I'm not sure, but it certainly feels like a very American thing, is that people eat in front of the TV.
Yes.
And I know that when I do that, and it's infrequent, but when I do it, I'm totally unaware of what I'm eating. I'm just literally, the action is I'm taking whatever's on the plate and putting it in my mouth. I'm not tasting it really.
Yep.
I'm certainly not being aware of how fast I'm eating. I tend to overeat because part of the time is, oh, there's a commercial for something delicious on the TV or something not so delicious, but it's still food oriented. So it's like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. So is this in fact a behavior that's very prevalent out there?
Yes, we are multitasking in everything.
Yeah.
And so whether it's eating at your desk between Zoom
Mm.
meetings or with camera off on a Zoom meeting, as the case may be for some folks who don't actually take lunch as a break. And also, I mean, TV eating is, they didn't come up with the word TV dinner for nothing, right? It's like it is a thing.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not here to like turn over people's lives in a way that's like, well, now I can't do the thing that I always do with my kids. And we always have a treat when we watch the Muppet Show and whatever it is. But understanding what about the eating in front of the TV? Like for some people, it may not be an issue. You may be a single mom and you and your kids are both out at soccer and you don't have a partner and the TV is your company. I'm not going to tell you to sit in silence with your, your piece of salmon and your brown rice and your broccoli rabe, which is of course what you're having on a normal weeknight dinner as a single mom. But and what you're eating in front of the television.
That's
But
right.
what I am going to say is, well, is it a problem or isn't it a problem? Is this eating that's going on so absent-mindedly that it has nothing to do with physiological hunger? So you led perfectly into the fourth pillar. So we said this is the method, the what we eat, the how much and how fast we eat as those other as 2 and 3, and the 4 is the why. And you
Mm.
have to get into the why are we eating? And are we eating for physiological hunger or are we eating for recreation, comfort, emotion, stress, situational, opportunistic. I have a whole bunch of words for this.
Yeah. So how do you figure that out? Because sometimes, well,
Yeah.
first of all, sometimes it's all the above, and then sometimes it's hard to figure it out.
Mhm.
How do you break that down for somebody?
I have some quick and dirty tests. So hopefully your listeners will, maybe this will resonate if people are thinking, I'm going to find out if I'm eating for reasons other than physiological hunger today. It's called the apple test. So nice, crunchy. We're talking about a good apple. I am not talking about a mealy apple. I'm talking peak season apple.
Yum.
The question is, would I want an apple right now if someone offered it to me? If the answer
Interesting.
is no, you are not physiologically hungry.
Fascinating. Oh, I like this. I like this.
Yeah.
So,
Be-
if you're given the opportunity to have, the best that nature makes,
Yep.
and we're assuming everybody likes apples
If
right
you
in the
have like
fall.
a tree fruit
Right,
allergy,
right.
send me a DM on my Insta or go to my website. I'll give you a different test that
Right.
will work for you.
But it's a great, I like that. I'm going to use it myself. Do I really need it, want it, crave it? How is it going to make me feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you don't want that apple, I'm not saying, well, then you shouldn't eat it all. I want us to understand why. So maybe it is boredom. Maybe it is, I just want something sweet in my mouth. I just want, but not an apple, a chocolate. It's okay. We can make it fit, right? It's not that we're working to extinguish all non physiologically related hunger because that's preposterous. We're not going to do it. It's Valentine's Day. There's a box of high end chocolates on your counter, or maybe not even high end, because I'm going to tell you something. Sometimes some mid range to like drugstore chocolates really do what you want them to do.
Again, it's
So,
reminiscent of what your grandmother might have bought you because there was no such
yep.
thing as, I don't know, fancy, I don't know chocolate that well, but there was no 70% cacao, organic chocolate at the time.
No, right. And these, there it wasn't you could buy a piece of chocolate for $4. It's like a piece of chocolate for $4, but
I know.
I'm sure I've done it. I'm sure
Right.
I've done it. So we're not looking to extinguish it all, but we are looking to put it in its place. And alongside that is if you are hungry, you would say, and there's no food in front of you, obviously. It's not like, would you want the burger or would you want the apple? You're hungry, you got no food around, someone offers you an apple. That's the scenario. But also understanding that if you don't want the apple, that's okay. If what you're wanting is just that it's before bed, I'm having my 1 or 2 squares of dark chocolate before I go upstairs because that's my shtick, also totally fine. However, if you are physiologically hungry and you're working with me, I'm going to ask you to identify, no, I am physiologically hungry. And I'm going to suggest not going for the chocolate first. Eat something whole foods based. Eat something like an apple or a really nice dish of your favorite full fat yogurt with some really nice, sprinkles of your favorite cereal on top or a couple of granola chunks or whole grain flakes and some nice raspberries or maybe a blob of jam or a little bit of peanut butter. Make yourself a nice whole foods based, delicious tasting snack. And then, if you still want a piece of chocolate, have it. Right. But first, let's address the physiological hunger with whole foods, because I guarantee if you're actually hungry and you either go for a bag of chips or you get into the chocolate cupboard, you are not going to be able to keep that portion at something you're probably going to feel great about.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to shift a little bit because you mentioned kind of all the noise that we're getting on Instagram and online.
Yeah.
And the two big ones right now that I'm getting bombarded with is this concept of fasting,
Mm,
intermittent fasting, and protein.
yeah.
And can we talk in a practical way about those two phenomenon or issues around nutrition and how we eat, please?
Absolutely. So you started with intermittent fasting.
Yeah,
It's all over my newsfeed too.
everywhere.
everywhere. And I actually decided to take the bait in a research oriented way yesterday. I'm like, oh, I just have to see what this app they're trying to get me on is going to tell me. What's my age? Where's the area of fat on my body that I'm looking to lose? Like, in somehow insinuating that the hours they're going to recommend for me to fast are going to correlate to what body part I would like to see get leaner. I can just already say there is not any science there. Here's why I don't like intermittent fasting. It is exactly the opposite of what I call intuitive eating. So
Mm.
intuitive eating is, again, the paying attention to what is my body saying. So you may wake up in the morning, your alarm goes off at 6:45. Perfectly normal. You're not hungry at 6:45 when it goes off. You might be. Are you? I don't know. Maybe you're hungry after you've had some water and some coffee or your favorite tea or whatever it is, your morning routine. You get the kids out of the door, you walk the dog. Now you're hungry. Great. Now, for you to decide arbitrarily or because you're following an intermittent fasting schedule that you are not going to let yourself eat until noon, but it's now 8, 8:30 and you're like, "Nah, I could eat. I'm hungry." But you're just gonna push it off and push it off and push it off and drink more water and drink more coffee maybe and just kind of deal with it. Does that set you up for any kind of good decision making, good rational decision making at noon? Does that set you up to eat slowly and mindfully for 20 minutes? No.
Does it set you up for making good decisions in your life? I mean, it's like if you
It
don't respond to your own body's hunger,
it makes
uh,
no sense.
yeah.
It is not proven to do. Here's what it's proven to do for people that it works for. It creates a boundary. It creates a rule, and a lot of people want rules, I have noted. So if you want really, really hard and fast rules that you follow, probably I would actually say, "Don't work with me." I will refer you to a colleague that is really into that kind of, like, I don't count macros. I mean, if we have to, we'll count them. Like, if I need to know you're getting enough protein and you're a vegan, we may do some macro counting just to make sure your protein is high enough, and we'll get there in a second. But if you're doing intermittent fasting and if it's working for you, I will not tell you to stop, okay? Because you have found something that creates the rules you're looking for, that's
Hmm.
allowing you to get into the calorie deficit that defines weight loss. So the truth is, a lot of the food people eat after 8 p.m. is not whole foods. It's couch food. It's chips. It's chocolate. It's candy. It's non nutritive eating, but can be highly caloric. So maybe it's true that if you've cut off your eating by 7 o'clock every night, you're not going to do that stuff you were doing. But it's not because it's 7 o'clock at night. There's nothing magic about creating that boundary. It's that it's created a way for you to control the intake.
Well put. I also was reading how avoiding that intuitive hunger
Mhm.
is also extremely stressful for the body.
Totally.
And the body goes into, hyper alert in a way that's the fight and flight reaction because the body thinks, oh, I'm about to run away from a lion and I need to store my energy and not waste time eating. But that chronic stressful status, if your sympathetics are constantly, constantly on fire,
Mhm.
that's not good for us. So, can you break that down a little bit? Does that sound familiar to you?
It sounds familiar. You're tapping
Yeah.
into a couple of ideas. One is this idea that when we deprive our bodies of food for extended periods of time, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is now, maybe we're talking more about people that are fasting for a couple days at a time, which is also a thing that folks do. Or,
Wow.
the infamous words detoxes and cleanses, they do compromise us metabolically. Right? And so what do I mean? What I mean is your body goes into what you said, that kind of preservation mode. Once it gets the idea that it's not being fed at predictable times when it's triggering that elevation in ghrelin, it starts to store energy. That makes sense, right? We should store if we're not being fed, we shouldn't burn it off as fast.
Right.
And so this is why we see, especially in folks that have endured times of extreme restrictions, such as anorexia nervosa, and who have reached a critically underweight space for themselves, that their bodies are begging and demanding to be fed. And guess what? They are going to hold on to the energy that they're given in a different way than they would if they were just regularly feeding and regularly burning. Right.
And
So,
look for resources in places that you don't want to break down, like muscle mass, etc.
correct. You've only
Yeah,
got what you've got to burn.
right.
The other thing is there was a study a few years ago that found a connection between acute cardiovascular events and intermittent fasting. There was an
Mm.
elevated statistic in heart attack frequency in folks that were intermittently fasting. I don't think that they've done yet enough research to identify what that like real connection is on like a cellular level, but it's very interesting.
Fascinating. Yeah, I don't know that science at all. All right. So I guess, what we want to reiterate for the listeners is it's okay to find ways of creating boundaries that will change your behavior around overeating or eating foods that aren't giving you nutrition. At the same time, you really want to ask yourself, why are you creating these boundaries and are they serving you?
Yeah,
And that may demand a discussion with someone like Rebecca, where you're really trying to suss out what's psychology, what's what's deprivation, what's driving you to do this, because it may or may not be serving you. Yeah.
exactly.
So let's shift into protein. Oh my gosh. So, I get all of these feeds, particularly around the midlife,
Mhm.
perimenopause and menopause, which I'd like to talk a little bit about, but
Yeah.
it's all about protein. Can you explain that to me, please?
For sure. So we need protein, right? We need protein for cellular repair and turnover, for our muscles to maintain their integrity. And again, when you work out, when you're sore, okay, it's the protein that heals that muscle, among other things. But you need adequate protein to heal the micro tears that are healthy, right? That create strength. We need protein to do that. I have found there is a lot of wildly elevated protein need suggestion out there. And I have a theory about as to how this happened, which I will say I find it mostly in sort of the fitness community. No words of disparagement meant to my friends, colleagues, and partners who are personal trainers and fitness professionals. Like all of my gratitude to you for committing your life to a field that's important. The basic human adult protein need is in fact a scientific equation established as zero point 0.8 grams to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. And I believe this is where things got lost in translation. Okay. I hear a lot of clients saying, I can't possibly get 150 grams of protein in. And I say, and where are you getting 150 grams? Well, I heard, or maybe my trainer said, again, I'm just calling it out because I think it's an important distinction. When we are calculating protein, you have to take your weight in pounds and divide it by 2.2 because we are not in the EU and we are not in every other country except for us that insists on using the standard method. So your weight in pounds divided by 2.2. So in fact, if you are, I'm going to do the math right now, if you are 150 pounds and you divide it by 2.2, I want to say it's somewhere around 70 something, but 150 divided by 2.2 equals 68. 68, not 150,
Right.
right? So not simple to meet 68, but by the way, almost every American is eating at least 68 grams of protein a day. 6 ounces of chicken has about 50 grams of protein right there.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. And new research. So, and that, by the way, that zero point 0.8 to 1 gram range is really for healthy adults. So, I mean, you're not healing any wounds. You do not have a condition like a cancer that you're healing or that you're trying to regenerate new growth, new healthy growth. You have burns, wasting diseases. And when I say wasting diseases, I mean diseases that actually break down our bodies, many types of cancer, full-blown AIDS, okay, things that we don't see so much of anymore that have really increased protein needs. Menopause, peri and menopause. new guidelines are suggesting that the number for us, high, is
Hi.
high, 1.0 to 1.2 per kilo. A
Now,
little
why is
higher.
it different? Why is it different?
So the theory here is that, first of all, every year starting at around age 30, we are actively losing muscle mass. Okay. And so that means unless we are actively rebuilding muscle mass, we are going to continue to shift the balance of how much lean body mass we have versus how much fat body mass we have and all of the other things to more in favor of more fat, less lean. And that's not what most people are looking for metabolically, right? Understandably.
Yep.
So, why higher now? Now, let's put on top of the fact that we're losing muscle mass because we're now past 30. Now we have a drop in estrogen. And this drop in estrogen gives us increased risk of heart disease, as we know, but also osteoporosis, because also our bones are breaking down. And so the integrity of keeping both our skeletal system and our musculature intact is suggesting that that number needs to just be a little bit higher. So where it really gets to on like a granular research lab level, I have to say I don't know because I haven't yet done the deep dive. But I'm trusting, like, it makes sense to me based on the science background I have and all of the, just so you know, registered dietitians have done a lot of science undergrad. Little pitch, nutritionist is an unregulated title. And so literally anyone, including you, listener, could hang a shingle today and say, you know what, I listened to this cool podcast today and I really liked what I heard and I learned a lot. I'm a nutritionist and people could come see you.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So it is not a regulated title. So I am going to ask the listeners to consider who they are seeing, if they are working with someone that is only calling themselves a nutritionist or perhaps a nutritionist, but some other words around it. If there isn't the word dietitian, you do want to check in on what science and what background they have in terms of coursework and training related to the field. It's not to say there are no good, sound nutritionists out there, but it's a much bigger playing field of folks that may not have the understanding.
Yeah. Great. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Boy, there's so much to talk about because I also wanted to, dive into fertility and food, but I think we're going to hold off because you and I are going to definitely have another conversation.
Can't
But
wait.
yeah, me too. Me too. As we come to a close, I just want to share something with you and
Yeah.
hear your thoughts as a kind of a person who has pursued leadership. So, throughout my career, I've spent a lot of time in hospitals, and I have particularly strong memories of working in a hospital day in and day out, weeks at a time as a resident. And I lived on Cheerios and graham crackers. I would go to the cafeteria in the hospital, and I was a vegetarian at the time, and I would eat overboiled broccoli and lots of bread and bread. I ate cheese, bread and cheese,
Mhm.
because there was nothing else to eat.
Yeah.
And even today, when I go into my local hospital to the cafeteria, which is very infrequently, but when I do, I'm impressed that there's a slight improvement, but
Yeah.
not a whole lot. And
Yeah.
then if you go to the labor floor, now there's some fruit. Now there's some alternatives to black Lipton tea. But the again, what we're feeding patients, what we're feeding doctors,
Oh, yeah.
clinicians, everybody in these settings. And I think hospitals are just one example. I would imagine Morgan Stanley, who probably has its own cafeteria, may not be feeding their employees a whole lot better. What is going on? Why are organizations, and again, maybe it's just an impression, are
Yeah.
organizations, that's a better way of putting it,
Yeah.
are organizations thinking a little bit wider and more globally about nutrition and well being than they were when I was a resident years ago?
So great question. Wow, we could do a whole episode on that. But I'm going to pick out the important, the key pieces here are
Right.
one, the commissary at Morgan Stanley is top notch.
Oh, good.
And RD approved, I might add. There's like a sushi station. There's a big, robust salad bar with like hard boiled eggs and all the dark leafy greens that you could possibly want, and a variety of dressings, including extra virgin olive oil and lemon juice if that's what you want. fresh fish every day. So I haven't been there in years, but I actually have a client who works at Morgan Stanley, and I'm like, oh, what's at the Morgan Stanley cafeteria today? So very interesting. However, hospitals. Now, the Mount Sinai, which is the last institution I was really eating lunch at every day, also has an excellent commissary. Interestingly, same management company. Okay. It's it's a big Morrison. If you've ever heard of Morrison, it's one of their offshoots. I believe it's Restaurant Associates. At least that's who was running it at the time. That's all discoverable information. Feel free to look it up. But
Mm-hmm.
what we're feeding our patients is hugely problematic, and by the way, is dictated by dollars and cents. So
Yeah.
you may have a big overarching outsourced food company like Aramark, Sodexo, Morrison, these companies that come in and run corporate cafeterias, and they also will run your entire health system food service for you. And it's getting better, right? It's getting better. Patients are getting more choice now. They've really moved from like the 3 trays a day that just come up with basically very minimal choice that you have to, scroll out on a little paper menu, to like a real person that comes up with an iPad and takes your order and gives you choices. Some places are even managing to do something called like at your time or whatever, it's time for you. Point being, it's like room service. You call, you place a call, or you use an iPad and you tell the kitchen when and what you want. So
Wow.
basically running it more like a hotel would run their food service,
Yeah.
right? Ideally, still within the confines of whatever prescribed diet you have. So folks that are on carbohydrate limited, or at least no concentrated sweets, or whether it's kidney disease or liver disease or low fat or high fat or extra calories or less calories, all of that has to be in place on like a regulatory level and meet various macro micronutrient breakdowns, but also it's got to be done on something like less than $3 a tray.
Wow.
So the budget in,
Mm.
in not-for-profit healthcare to feed patients well is very, very, very low. And that is
Interesting.
part of the problem. So
Yep.
no, you're not getting organic, kale, Caesar salads with, an olive oil based dressing and, Bell and Evans grilled chicken.
Yeah. So again, it's about money.
It's
Well,
about money.
I'm glad to hear there's greater insight. And I'm glad to hear that at least organizations that have some money, like Morgan Stanley, are using it in a way to provide nutrition, choice, and opportunity for wellness vis-a-vis our food to their employees. I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah.
It still, I will say, doesn't mean that you can't get the big jumbo slice of pizza and a hot dog and a bag of chips and a large soda.
Yeah.
You just have choice.
Yeah. Great. Great. Alrighty, so we are coming to a close, and I like to end GynoCurious with 2 questions. One, how do people find you? If they hear you speak today and they're like, oh, I got to work with this person, how do they find you?
Couple of ways. Newly launched website is just RebeccaBlakeNutrition.com, Instagram, Rebecca Blake Nutrition, and all of my contact information is on both. You can get on a mailing list. You can just reach out and say, I want to know more about X, Y, and Z. Just send me a message, say, hey, whatever
Great.
you want. Or say, I don't like apples. Can you please give me a different test? I'm
I
allergic.
like that. Oh, or if all that just fell to the wayside, contact Radio Free Rhinecliff or contact me at gynocurious.com and I will get you in touch with Rebecca. So, pleasure. We started the conversation talking about pleasure. What do you do in your time to give yourself pleasure? And, I hope there are many things, but if you had to choose
Yeah.
one thing, what gives you joy and pleasure in your life?
So many things.
Mm.
Love.
Mm, I like that. Love,
Yeah.
relationship,
Yep.
being seen, being heard,
Yep.
perhaps being touched. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
great. Mm, may you be surrounded by it.
Thanks, Amy. It's been so nice to be here today. I really appreciate you having me.
It's really my pleasure having you. And I'm already thinking about what our next episode is going to talk about. So stay tuned because I'm going to have Becky back and we're going to talk about supplements and adaptogens and herbs and ways of particularly staying well in times in women's lives that are around fertility and menopause, because as we've already briefly touched on, these hormonal chimes are impacting how we eat, what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to dive deeper into those issues. So Becky, thank you so much for joining me.
You're so welcome. Thanks.
And thank you to Radio Free Rhinecliff, Maddie Rosenberg, and Jen Hammoud, my co-producers. And until the next episode, please follow us on whatever app you're following. Listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the greatest of teachers, not to be ignored.